by the way, they are now too. He says, this is not even Israel. He says, really, Iran. And then my father-in-law says, where else would we go? So I share this story because A, it's true, and B, because it's the reason why I took this job. So look, my background's in business. That's the world that I know. And I thought after doing a bit of public service, I'd go back to California, go home, go back to making money, building brands and great companies. But I don't take it for granted. I think about my grandfather's experience in Germany, and my father-in-law's experience in Iran. And I don't take it for granted for 1 second that my grandchildren will be raised here in America unless we fight for what we have. Unless we fight for the values and the rights that we have. I won't make this mistake that they did. Now, maybe it's not a mistake. How can they have known that our history teaches us that this is what happens? And what we have here in this country, which is a blessing but not blessing, you know? What we have in this country is an aberration, not the norm. Now that doesn't mean it can't be sustained, but it does mean we have to commit ourselves to this project if we want to sustain it. So, you know, thank God we have the state of Israel. I think a lot of the reasons why we have it, we have here today, is because we have a sovereign state of Israel. But the reason why I took this job is because of nights like this, right? Which I won't countenance. And I'm not going to be party to in America that doesn't make sure that my grandchildren can be here and be raised here and choose to be as Jewish as they want to.
I'm going to put two questions together and allow you just to respond however you want. Try to wrap up a reflection on the Holocaust, on the Shoah, which, again, is our starting point for today. So you spoke about your personal work.
Yeah.
Where does Holocaust memory, if at all, fit into ADL's work, is one question. And second, there have been recent news items, occurrences, not only in our country, where Holocaust commemorations or Holocaust memorials don't specifically mention the Jewish people,
right,
the Jewish victims. How do you, or how does the ADL relate to that phenomenon and navigate it in the world we live in today?
So I guess there are a few things. I mean, number one, we're very focused on preserving the memory of the Shoah. So we have education. You know, basically at the ADL we do three things. We do advocacy, education, and law enforcement. So we do advocacy. We try to change laws through courts and Congress, focusing on protecting the Jewish people and other minorities, preserving the First Amendment, and defending the state of Israel. Number two, we do education. So one of the largest providers in the United States of anti-bias, anti-hate content in schools. We touch between 1.5 million and 2 million kids every year, all over the country. And then number three, we work with law enforcement. We help them track hate crimes, we help them investigate hate crimes, and we train them how to deal with hate extremism. The training that the ADL developed at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum is now mandatory for all FBI agents. Our training is mandatory for all NYPD recruits and senior leadership. So we integrate the memory of the Holocaust in a lot of this because you need to understand as a law enforcement officer what happens when you follow the dictates of your superiors but don't follow your conscience. And a lot of our content in classrooms, which reaches millions of kids a year, which is universal in nature, uses the Holocaust as a reference. I think we have to hold on to it. Now, I'll also acknowledge that it's fair to say that I think the memory of the Holocaust has almost been genericized to a degree. Everybody understands that. It feels less Jewish in many ways. And Holocaust remembrance statements, whether it's this president, who I think we can say safely, I mean, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. I think we can safely say this White House is a little bit to the right. or the government of Canada, Prime Minister Trudeau, which I think we can safely say is a little bit to the left. Both of those, President Trump and Prime Minister Trudeau released statements this year that talked about the Holocaust and didn't mention the word Jew or Jewish. Part of this phenomenon, I would say. And we need to, now, they're a little bit different. So when President Trump did it, there had been a pattern over the prior, I don't know, 18 plus months since he became a candidate, where he'd been sort of flirting with, or people around him flirting with the extreme right in ways that this seemed less of an outlier and more of a data point on a trend line. I follow, Prime Minister Trudeau a little less closely, but I think less of a pattern there. But nonetheless, we spoke out in both cases because it's a problem. When you release a Holocaust remembrance statement that doesn't remember why we remember the Holocaust, it's a problem no matter who's saying it. Period. That experience really helps shape who we are and why we fight anti-Semitism. So let's talk about that. So look, I think it's also fair to say that we as a Jewish community, as I was pointing out earlier, live with enormous privilege, historical privilege. I mean, we have achieved in ways in this country which I think, George Washington would be stunned by. I mean, just imagine it for a moment. The Jewish people have literally excelled in every discipline, in every field. We have the same rights and privileges as all other Americans. We're at the highest levels of business and arts and culture and science and academia. Today, whether you like them or not, I'm not really interested in how you vote. I'll just tell you that right now. I really don't care. I'm more interested in not what you vote, how you vote, but what you value. But putting that aside for a minute, imagine that today, this president has an Orthodox son-in-law and an Orthodox daughter, a Jew by choice, who wanted into our crazy community, God bless her, and Jewish grandchildren running around the residence in the East Wing of the White House. I mean, I've been told they've kasherized one of the kitchens. So I say this because never before in the history of the United States of America, never before in the history of this democratic republic, have we ever had such an intimate relationship with the commander-in-chief. So that doesn't necessarily explain or excuse his policies, not talking about that. I'm simply pointing out something that he stood at the Kotel and prayed. My God, it's an amazing thing. Amazing thing. So that's amazing. And the other thing that is good news is that when we look at anti-Semitic attitudes in the United States, which we've been measuring since the 1960s, anti-Semitic attitudes in the United States are down. They are down. Our last audit in 2016, they were roughly at 14%, which means 40% of the population holds classically anti-Semitic attitudes. We do these surveys and polls that people don't realize what they're being surveyed about.
We used this back at 14%.
When we did it in 2013, it was 12%. So when we started doing this in the 60s, sorry, I didn't say, it was closer to 30. So let me be clear. We are accepted, we have achieved, we have excelled. That's the good news, and it's very good news. The not so good news is that anti-Semitic incidences are up. So basically, we do an annual audit of incidences. We have 26 offices across the United States, and we collect information out in the field. So either we hear about something or someone comes to us. My people investigate every single report, and we validate and verify them. So this isn't rumor. This isn't someone reading something that happened at a college campus and says, oh, it isn't this. My people go and make sure that everything is real. And so we've been doing it year after year, and we saw last year, I'll be very frank, it happened after November, about a year ago today, we saw this spike in hate crimes against a lot of different minorities, but in particular Jews. So when it came time for the annual report, and last year, anti-Semitic incidents were up year over year. So in 2016 versus 2015, they were up 34%. 34% increase. That's very high. So we didn't want to wait. I didn't want to wait this year until the end of the year to assess the problem. I said to my staff, I want to look at it on a quarterly basis. We've never done that before. So this year, we just released the audit, again, the third quarter audit. So I'm going to give you all 3 quarters together in aggregate, okay? So far, anti-Semitic incidences are up 67% this year over the first 3 quarters of last year. Now, 6, 7. Now, I'm talking about, just so we're clear, acts of harassment, vandalism, and violence. So for the NYPD, they track assaults, they track, graffiti. They don't track harassment. We also track when a kid is harassed, bullied in school, when somebody throws pennies at him or her, when somebody bullies them, there's a pattern of behavior. Okay? So in New York State, year over year, and not, again, we're only talking 3 quarters, a 96% increase. We had 267 incidences so far this year. A 62% increase, 62% of those incidences are acts of vandalism, swastikas, graffiti, that kind of thing. Some of which you see right here in Riverdale, by the way. In New York City, a 92% increase. 9-2. 171 incidences in New York City, 80% of which are in Manhattan and Brooklyn. Now, the fact of the matter is that anti-Semitic incidences are down over where they were, say, 15 years ago. It's actually less today than there used to be, which is good. The challenge, I think, is that the trend line is not good. So then the question often is, well, why is that? I will tell you that typically, after an incident in the Middle East, and I heard this from Commissioner O'Neill, NYPD Commissioner O'Neill, after an incident in the Middle East, there's usually a spurt or a surge of anti-Semitism. So anti-Israel types get riled up, and there's graffiti or there's an assault or something like that. What's different now, and this is not me talking, this is what I've heard from law enforcement officials at the FBI and big police departments, is that this isn't a spike, it seems to be a sustained surge. So it's not a one-time thing. They are surprised at how long it's lasting. Okay, so then you get to, well, why is it lasting so long? I mean, I think, again, I don't really care how you vote. I'll say it again. You may love the president, not like the president, I'm really not interested. But I will tell you that I think that extremists feel emboldened in this environment. Extremists feel empowered in an environment in which, number one, the commander-in-chief equivocates on what used to be unequivocal. There are no fine people on the side of the Nazis. I'm sorry. That's how I feel. And I think that David Duke and that ilk, those who support him, who are in orbit around white supremacists, positively, absolutely, should be denied entry into the public conversation. Period. End of story. That has not exactly been the tone that came out of the campaign or the new administration. Why is that? That's another conversation. But number one, and when I say extremists feel emboldened, how do I know this? Because that's what they are saying. If you read their media, their blogs, their tweets, and unfortunately we do, and we look at their chats, not just on Facebook and what they post on their pages, I have people looking at them sub rosa. They feel like the wind's at their head, which is the reason why, actually, we've seen an increase in targeting on college campuses. So last year, for the first 2 months of the year, again, I got people all over the U.S. We track white supremacist activity generally, and specifically we pay attention to what's happening on campuses. My people tracked 9 incidences of white supremacist flyering, or speeches, or meetings on college campuses last year, first 2 months of the year. This year, first 2 months of the year, 80 incidences. 8-0. It's nearly a 10 times increase. So they're telling us they feel empowered and encouraged. Their membership rolls are up. They feel more comfortable coming out in the public. And the data suggests this. I'll also say that I don't think those of you who may not like the president, or maybe some of your audience, should feel like, yep, I knew I was right. Because neither side of the spectrum has a monopoly on morality. Neither side of the spectrum is exempt from intolerance. And what we've seen with the anti-Israel left is also profound and really troubling. Now, there's a lot of attention paid to college campuses, and there should be. This is where the next generation was formed. But more generally, we've seen it at a gay pride march this summer in Chicago, where marchers with a rainbow flag, the Jewish star on it, were literally stopped and asked to leave. I shouldn't say asked, requested to leave. Why? Because the Jewish star was seen as, it made people feel uncomfortable. And they were told specifically, Zionists are wrong. Literally, I testified in Congress on Tuesday about a piece of legislation we're trying to get done, the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. We want the Department of Education to use a definition of anti-Semitism that includes hostile anti-Jew behavior. Because too often, people will say, I love Jews, it's just the Jewish state I detest and think should be destroyed. The same language they used to use about Jews as individuals, they now use about the Jewish state. So anti-Semitism comes in many forms, but whether it's the fringe left or the extreme right, I think we're in an environment where these the kind of radicals feel like they're like on the rise. And you know who loses in an environment where radicalism flourishes, where populism flourishes? Who loses? Hint. It's all of you. It's all of us. And this isn't just like my opinion. You are welcome to go back and look through the annals of history about what happens to Jews during revolutions. What happens to Jews, again, when radicals take hold. So this is why we're very concerned. Very, very concerned. And, I think this, for me, this is not what I necessarily expected to happen my first year and a half, 2 years on the job, but it reminds me of how important work is.
You touched sort of all of the pieces of my anti-Semitism, anti-Israel questions at once. So let's move to action. I think we'll have a chance for more Q&A and people can probe more deeply the pieces that you've laid out here. But you've said enough, and even if you hadn't, we know it, but you've said enough and provided enough data to reinforce a feeling of fear, of insecurity, of deep concern, of vulnerability in sentiments towards Jewish people and the Jewish state in our city, our state, our country, and the world. What can we do about it? What does the ADL do about it? And how can we be partners?
So, it's a good question. I think there are a few things to think about. I mean, I think, first and foremost, it's really important when you hear intolerance, not just anti-Semitism. The first amicus brief that the ADL filed with the Supreme Court of the United States was a restrictive housing covenant in 1947, focused on a case where blacks and Jews were barred from, buying homes in a particular area. And if you watch the video of Charlottesville, that was ostensibly a rally about preserving Southern heritage and these Confederate statues. And it somehow devolved into Jews will not replace us, blood and soil. It's a reminder that when someone expresses intolerance for any people, chances are anti-Semitism is right around the corner. So, when you hear hate, first thing you can do, you don't have to be a card carrier with the ADL, speak out and interrupt it. Whether it's at the water cooler, or it's at the Thanksgiving or the Shabbat table, or it's in your Facebook feed, or it's an email from, you know, Uncle Morty, or your neighbor, like, interrupt it. Don't roll your eyes. There's Uncle Morty again. Roll up your sleeves and shut it down. That's the first thing. The second thing you can do is, you know, we have educational programs. Educational programs which are intended to, you know, sort of touch hearts and minds. And we should have, I don't know, we have to hear in your yeshiva here, or in your schools where your children go, or your grandchildren. But we've got educational materials you should bring into your communities. Try to inoculate your school and your kids against hate before it happens. Thirdly, you can get involved. You can volunteer. You know, the fellow who leads our New York regional office, he is a modern Orthodox Jew himself. Bernstein, he's terrific. We're very active here. Ariel Footer in the back, my special assistant, raise your hand, Ariel. He's here tonight. And get involved. Volunteer. And I think we can look at programming other ways to support the shul, the Bayit specifically. So I guess, you know, so when I'm giving you some ideas about what we can do to help, Rabbi, I should ask you. This is dialogue, right? Both of us.
Yes.
So I mean, I wonder, how do you know, the Open Orthodox movement is very interesting because you yourself are doing things differently, I think it's safe to say. I think Rabbi Weiss kind of forged his path, you're following his footsteps. How do you deal with intolerance in the Orthodox community? How does the Open Orthodox movement deal with it?
I'm happy to take a step. And then I want to go back to you. But I think the model in our synagogue and in our community is along the lines of what we laid out. And these are biblical mandates. Don't stand idly by when your neighbor's blood is being spilled. Which at one level speaks to our innermost neighbors, our Jewish brothers and sisters. But we have lots of neighbors, and we have a responsibility, of course, to our fellow New Yorkers, our fellow Americans, and humankind around the world. I think, for me, we share the experience of following in the footsteps of incredible giants. And for me, when I think of our value and the broader, open, modern Orthodox community, which is walking that line of Jewish tradition and a deep basis in Judaism, Jewish text, and Jewish value, and a desire to be in conversation with and take responsibility for the world at large, is that sense that first and foremost is to speak up and to speak out. That's why I think when sometimes it feels like, what's the point of a rally?
Right.
You know, what we need is law enforcement and education, you know, far and wide. It's that reminder that the rally is the speaking up and the speaking out. It's the sense that when there are actions of hatred or violence, we don't just say a prayer in shul, right? But we gather as a group and say, this is not acceptable, this is not okay. We stand with our Jewish brothers and sisters, our brothers and sisters wherever around the world that are being victimized because of their beliefs or their race or their ethnicity or their humanity. And so I think that's one of the first pieces.
But it can be hard. Like, how do you choose? Like, how do you choose? How do you choose? You stand up for the Sudanese? You stand up for the Rohingya? You stand up for the Kurds?
Right.
Like, these are difficult choices.
Yeah.
How do you choose?
Yeah. I struggle with that question because there is an infinite number of causes, and I think sometimes it's what's the call of the moment, where will we have the most energy to respond? Sometimes it's the opposite. What's not getting enough attention, and what can we raise up that feels underappreciated or underattended to? And I think another piece for us is trying to create coalitions in our community. Riverdale clergy get together and think about what are the causes that we can raise a voice for together. But I think that's a very good question and a very hard question. And I think our answer has always been our first responsibility is to our innermost family, to our Jewish brothers and sisters. That's where our closest connection lies. But we have a responsibility to all people, and our responsibility to our Jewish brothers and sisters is displayed by showing that we care about and that we respond to hatred when it's directed against anybody.
Sure.
That's, when I've been thinking about Southern Springs in Texas in the sense that an attack on any house of worship is an attack on all houses of worship, and that's the responsibility that we have. So we are looking to partner, and we are looking to learn and to work alongside ADL and every group. I wanted to...
I'll just say something.
Yes.
So, like, I had the privilege of speaking the other day to Dr. Price, is his name. Larry Page. No, not Larry Page. Larry Price, I think, who is the head of the Southern Baptist Convention, who is about to go down to Texas to minister. This church lost half of its members. And it's horrific. I can't find the words to describe it. So I do think, like, as a member of the clergy and as a member of the community, like, I would urge you to reach out. I don't know if you have a Southern Baptist or a Baptist or some kind of Protestant denomination church here. This is Riverdale. Yeah. But if there ever was a moment, this is a moment to reach out to those folks. Yeah. It's terrible. Terrible.
I feel like I jumped over one piece that I want to come back to.
Sure.
So incidents that are on the rise, and we talked a little bit about how we all partner. How are institutional responses from police and other community organizations now as opposed to any other time? With this uptick in anti-Semitic incidents and extremism, in addition to speaking up for ourselves and ADL speaking up for us, what's ADL's perspective on whether the response,
this is a great question,
law enforcement and others has been appropriate?
It's a great question. It's just yesterday.
It wasn't on our list, so I appreciate you taking it.
Just yesterday, yesterday was a group Jewish Voices for Peace. I'm not a fan. They protested ADL offices around the country. They had several people, half a dozen people get arrested in the office downtown. They protested ADL because we partner with law enforcement. And we've been doing that for decades. And part of that training is bringing them to Israel for some of the counterterrorism stuff. And they partner because they don't want us training with law enforcement. They think somehow we're contributing to whatever. It's atrocious and disgusting that these people are protesting this way. Because we are blessed.
What's the name of
to
the
have
organization?
JVP, Jewish Voices. The peace is clearly not what they want. Because we are blessed to have law enforcement officers who take our community very seriously and who treat us with tremendous respect. And part of it is that we forge bonds over the years. So the fact of the matter is that literally, I can tell you pretty much unequivocally that the collaboration with law enforcement has never been better. Whether it's an act of graffiti or vandalism of any sort, whether it's harassment or violence, again and again and again, I've met them all over the country. I've met victims and families of victims, and they typically respond incredibly well. Look, the FBI, I had several meetings with Director Comey, blessed memory of sorts, during those bomb threats. They took it so seriously when our JCCs and our day schools and my ADL offices, like my office here in New York, were getting these bomb threats. Now, it turns out it was American Israeli teenager national level, go figure. But the outcome was still the same for our community. People scared. Parents telling me they were going to take their kids out of Camp JCC over the summer because they were vulnerable. Essentially, adult children telling me they were taking their parents, elderly parents, out of rehab at JCCs because they were scared for them. So whoever the perpetrator is, these crimes have an impact that's real. And I thank God that the police work so closely with us. And that relationship, our close collaboration, gives us a chance to work with them on issues like unconscious bias, to work with them on issues like institutional racism. I feel like very humbled when I see that these people who put their bodies on the line for our communities, the good work that they do on behalf for the Jewish people. It's great. We're lucky. very, very helpful.
I'm going to start to share a few of the questions that we've received already, and then we'll open it up.
Fire away.
In various ways, we touched on these, but maybe we'll go a little bit deeper.
Sure.
And you offered me that question about how we pick our battles.
Yeah.
So this question, with Jews being buffeted today by anti-Semitism on the left and right, how do we choose our battles wisely so that we can have a meaningful impact? Can we be effective without non-Jewish allies?
That's a good question. So can we be effective without non-Jewish allies?
And then don't forget to come back to choosing our battles with the left and the right.
So, when the ADL was founded in 1913, it was around the time that Leo Frank was lynched. It was actually lynched a few years after it was founded. It was in that environment, that moment around the trial. Leo Frank trial, like the Dreyfus trial in America. The way the Dreyfus trial spawned, if you will, motivated personal, let's say that Israel. I think the Frank trial here in this country, not only did it help catalyze the ADL, I think it helped to, awaken our community that we have to pull together if we want to preserve what we have. And so when the founders created ADL, they wrote it, because it was created long before any Fox, long before me. They wrote a charter, and in that charter, a big long document, and in it you can find essentially a sentence that says the purpose of the organization will be to, quote, stop the defamation of the Jewish people and secure justice and fair treatment to all. Not justice and fair treatment to the Jews, to all. Now it's very Jewish, right? If I'm not, to be for others. We sort of came up with that whole idea, Hillel did. But the fact of the matter is the ADL has always worked to protect the Jewish people by making this country one that's good for all of its minorities, all of its people. And so the essence of the work is about coalition building. And I got news for you. I just told you how we've achieved in this country, and it's true, empirically true. It's an assertion of fact. And we've exceeded in extraordinary ways. And yet, what percent of the population are we? How many Jews are there in this country? I'll answer that question for you. Let's say on a good day, 5.5 million. On a really good day, 5.5 million. How many people are there in this country? 335 million. So anyone who thinks it's only us, we should only be for us, is crazy. When I say that, I just mean, if you do the math, and it's us against the world, and we're not building coalitions, not showing up for others, I don't think that works. And I see that not just as a moral question, in some abstract sense, I see that as a practical matter, as in an arithmetic, matter of arithmetic. So we've got to find ways. And by the way, we have. Judeo-Christian values have made it, that whole construct has helped to include Jews as part of the majority for years. And the work that we've done with evangelicals around Israel, around Catholics here in this country on many things, that coalition building has been critical to the success we have here. And sometimes I think we forget that at our own peril. At our own peril. Now, left, right, look, it's interesting because we try, like I said, to be apolitical. Some people try to paint me and ADL on the left. Some people try to paint me and ADL like these folks who might be these protesters. They try to paint us on the right. I say all the time, I don't think there's anything political about fighting prejudice. I don't think there's anything partisan about being principled. So we try to stay very strong and centered and rooted in our values, which means you take them as you see them. And you don't get passed to either side, to any political party or any either side of the aisle.
I'll use the questioner's words here. Because of the Holocaust, being anti-Semitic is generally considered politically incorrect. Instead, people are hiding their hatred attitude towards Jews as anti-Zionism. We started to touch on this, and I'd love to hear more. What is ADL doing to counteract this and protect American Jews, especially students on the college campus?
Literally, I testified at the House Committee yesterday, the full committee hearing. I'm sorry, it was Tuesday, so 2 days ago, on this bill that we're trying to get passed, the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. Because the way we think about anti-Semitism needs to, if you will, evolve relative to the way that the detractors have changed their language and used different, they kind of disguise it in quote-unquote political rhetoric. I don't have a problem with Jews, just Zionists. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, plain and simple. Now, I find myself telling this to Jews sometimes. In fact, I had a heated is a nice way of putting it, dinner conversation in Tel Aviv. It's last month. Yeah, with a woman who's Israeli, born in Jerusalem, telling me that anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitic. I'm just going to try to make this very clear. A Jewish woman, generations, Sabra, born in Jerusalem. So, whether your anti-Zionism is anti-Semitic in intent, or whether your anti-Zionism is anti-Semitic in its outcome, for me, it's all the same. Because I don't deal with abstractions, I deal with consequences. I deal with those kids on a college campus who, because they wear a Magen David, are afraid to walk in certain parts. Afraid to put it out there. So, you know, to be perfectly honest with you, this is one of the hardest issues. And, you know, I think legislation that will make sure campus administrators take anti-Zionism as seriously as we need them to is a critical part of the solution. But there's no silver bullet, by the way. Like, a lot of times I hear about BDS legislation. Aren't you fighting for BDS legislation? There is no silver bullet. I mean, I know I would like there to be some magic wand I could wave and it would all be over. It's far more complicated. So I think legislation can be part of the process, but it's going to take culture change. It takes political engagement. It takes socializing kids and administrators. It takes ways to go after faculty, to engage in trustees. There are a lot of different fronts in this battle, and it's a long one. We've got to be prepared to fight.
One more prepared question, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. I'm not sure if this may be out of the scope of your work, but I'll let you tell me.
Let her rip.
After nearly 70 years, why can't Israel be admitted to the Security Council of the UN? And why doesn't the U.S. have the guts to say something in the UN after all this time?
Okay. This is a little bit outside of the scope. I will tell you that the United States is the most ardent defender that the state of Israel has. Ambassador Haley is doing God's work, fighting this stuff in ways I wish Ambassador Power had done, her predecessor. You know, America's support for Israel has not always been quite as strong. We haven't always had ambassadors who are quite as robust as this one. But our country, they fight. And even Ambassador Power, who let go of this really terrible resolution in December that, you know, critiqued the state. It was really quite negative. But even for that Shonda, on a day-to-day basis, the staff at the U.S. mission for the UN every day are fighting for Israel. Every day. Why? Because she is a democracy. And they know that she is embattled. And we know that she's our best ally. What?
Mr. Olson, I know that was your question.
First thing I would do would go to Europe. The Sultan said it's very nice that if Israel is not a member of the Security Council, in 1 hour, they can place a condemnation.
I'm going to give you a chance to follow up afterwards, but I want to make sure we get to some other voices.
I hear you.
We're going to start with Bernie and Marion, and then take a couple more. Bernie and Marion.
Hi. What was your name?
Bernie.
Very nice to meet you.
Pleasure listening. Thank you very much. First, small point, you mentioned the congressional testimony that you gave this week. I believe I read that it was the chair of the Wake Forest Jewish Studies.
Yeah.
Who was
This
not
guy.
concerned about anti-Semitism on campus. But, so I'll let you respond to that. I also wanted to ask, you talked about coalition building.
Yeah,
And you mentioned different groups.
yeah,
I have a picture in my mind, almost always, with Martin Luther King, with Abraham Joshua Heschel,
yeah,
arm in arm.
yeah.
The relationship with the black community seems a lot more fraught. And I haven't heard you say anything about that.
Sure, I'll talk about that. So first, I testified, and as Bernie said, there were 9 people on the panel, including a fellow from AJC, the American Jewish Committee. Let's see, there was a Jewish Studies professor from such and such place. There was a guy from this, Rabbi Cooper from the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles. And next to him was this fellow, Professor Barry Trachtenberg from Wake Forest University. Now, I never met Professor Trachtenberg before, but my eyebrows went up when in his opening statement he said that Zionism has at its core dual loyalty. And even Herzl said that Jews can't be patriots of their own countries, they need to be for Israel first, or for a Jewish state first, or something like that, which is one of the most pernicious stereotypes about Jews that's persisted for millennia. That somehow we are not loyal to the country we're in, we're more loyal to, you know, Klal Israel, or as it is today, you know, Eretz Israel. And it went down with it. So I think this guy said some awful things, and I pushed back and questioned him. And he said at one point, look, I teach the Holocaust or something, teach Jewish history. He said, I teach my course. I said, look, it must be very nice to be in the, and he said, to elaborate on what Bernie was asking. So this professor said, anti-Semitism isn't really a problem. The so-called definition would chill free speech. And it would inhibit the ability of kids to have open conversations about Israel, Palestine, or whatever. And I said, well, look, it must be very nice to be living in the ivory tower. But here on Main Street, where I live, let me tell you about the consequences that I'm seeing day in and day out when the families affected by in a country where anti-Semitism is up 67% year on year. And I laid it out for him. And then at another point, he countered and said, well, look, I teach my course over 15 weeks. And I know what I'm talking about. I said, well, that's great. The ADL's been doing this for over 100 years. And I think I know what I'm talking about, too. We don't look at one campus as he does. We look at 4,000 college campuses across the country. But let's acknowledge, though, to Bernie's point, that you know, there are those in our community who have very strongly held different ideas. And some of them, I think, are very destructive. Again, both sides, guys, left and right. And I think we as a Jewish people have always benefited from moderation, we benefited from centrism, we benefited from reason and facts. And if we can bring the conversation back to that, in the long run, I think we do better than the alternative. Yeah, I think it's safe to say many of us look back on the Heschel King photos, blacks and Jews marching together. Let me tell you a slightly different story. So the ADL in 1952, one of the things we do is advocacy. We file amicus briefs. We filed an amicus brief in the Brown v. Board of Education case. This is the landmark desegregation case. This was a bold thing for the ADL to do. Most Americans, you know, were not sold on desegregation. It was a very controversial topic in the early 80s. Now, I will admit I wasn't there. Some of you may have been there. You may have a different perspective than me, but from what I have read. And when ADL took this position, there was great dissension within the ADL. The offices that we had in the South, and members of the South, did not agree with the position that headquarters took. And it almost tore our community, our organization apart. I say that because I think we romanticize the idea that Jews and blacks are always totally aligned. I'm not sure it was actually always that way. Now, Heschel and King certainly were. Ben Epstein, the man who had my job in the 50s and 60s, developed a close relationship with King. We send people on the Freedom Rides. And not only did Ben Epstein march in Selma with Dr. King, he brought his leadership team from New York, and ADL personnel from around the country drove to Alabama. We all marched together. And when they signed the Voting Rights Act, we have the picture in our office. Ariel's seen it. The picture of the voting in the Rose Garden in the White House is LBJ standing next to the CEO of the NAACP, standing next to Robert Kennedy, standing next to Martin Luther King, standing next to Ben Epstein, the head of the ADL. It's pretty amazing. But today, it's safe to say that the relationship is more fraught. I think it's more fraught for several reasons. Number one, I think like the Jewish community, the black community is not a monolith. Different people, different opinions, just like our community. And so when we say blacks and Jews, really there's a wide range of people in both communities. There still is a great deal of harmony in lots of ways, but I think we have not always been on the same side, certainly at a communal level, on issues like affirmative action. We haven't been always on the same side on issues. We've taken umbrage with some prominent African-American leaders like Andy Young, Matthew Johnson, or Jesse Jackson makes comments about this city. And so I think sometimes some of our reactions have elicited those statements elicited hard feelings on our side, and then the subsequent blowback elicited hard feelings on their side. And look, I also think that we have succeeded in ways that are, again, quite historical. And the black community, in many ways, if you look at economic progress, literacy rates, mass incarceration rates, they haven't succeeded in quite the same way as a community. So there's work to be done to repair the breach that exists between our two communities, because indeed those people in Charlottesville underscore that even if we're not always on the same side of every single issue, even if we're not always at the exact same socioeconomic status, we have more in common than you can imagine. And the people who hate us hate them. So I think there's work to be done.
Marion's next.
What was your name again?
Marion.
Marion.
Do you measure or record the frequency of anti-Semitic incidents in different ethnic groups?
We have looked, well, we don't always know the proportion. Yeah, sorry, good point. So Marion asks, do we measure the frequency and the source of anti-Semitic incidences by ethnic group? So, with respect to incidences, it is very difficult for us to know who are the perpetrators of these incidences. So we don't track the ethnic identity of perpetrators. We have looked from time to time at anti-Semitic attitudes in different minority communities in the U.S. And we see higher incidents, like our last report was in 2016, we saw higher incidences of anti-Semitic opinions among first generation Latinos at very high numbers. And I think in part we attribute that to people who come here from Latin America, very Catholic countries, with the teachings of the church, Vatican II notwithstanding. They often believe that Jews are Christ killers and things like that. In fact, those numbers go markedly down by the next generation. There were higher attitudes of anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic opinions amongst the Muslim community. Interestingly, though, I remember that stat. It was the favorability. This is true. This was the data on Israel. It was 50-50 in the Muslim community. So one might think that 99% of all Muslims would be disinclined toward Israel. The numbers were 50-50, positive, negative. So some of that data may surprise you, Mary. Some of it may surprise you.
I'm not going to get to everybody, but I'm just looking around.
I'll try to give shorter answers so more people can ask questions.
Okay, Danielle, and then I have to give a shout out. The architect and designer of our main sanctuary, Marty Zelnick, is here in the green sweatshirt. So he's going to get the second question. So Danielle, then Marty.
I take your point that you see anti-Semitism on the right and the left. I want to focus my question on the left for a second. Because from the right, it seems to me it's sort of the same old message, empowered in different media. But I see something on the left which is somewhat a little different, in that it seems to me that it's taking the message that you stated as in created the ADL of if there's intolerance formed towards one, it's intolerance towards all, and ultimately it comes back to us, and turns it on its head. In the sense that you have a lot of sort of this notion of intersectionality, where the belief is you can't be supportive of minority groups, you can't be supportive of LGBTQ, you can't be truly supportive of women's rights, if you don't at the same time condemn Israel. And so my question is really two parts. Number one, are Jewish groups working with the leadership of groups like Black Lives Matter and various LGBTQ groups to sort of explore this notion of intersectionality and watch trouble about it? That's one. Number two, what ends up happening is a lot of very idealistic and well-meaning college students and young adults are attracted to progressive movements for all the obvious reasons people get attracted to progressive movements. And sort of this notion sort of gets swept up.
Yeah.
So is there any attempt to sort of counteract that piece?
So there's a couple things. So Danielle asked a really good question. So intersectionality is this theory, this kind of social sciences theory, that all the different struggles are intersectional, right? So everything intersects. And so I think you're right to say that the biggest, well, maybe you didn't have to say this, but the biggest proponents of this view tend to be folks with very pro-Palestinian ideas who try to take their issue, just an issue that's happening over there, like in the Middle East, and bring it here to the U.S. Yeah, you know, when he was talking about, Bernie asked a question about Heschel and King, that was intersectionality. Right? We talked about Hillel, Rabbi Hillel, and the sages, and that was intersectionality. It's been distorted in this current context and politicized in ways I think are deeply unhealthy. There are some groups we talked to, so after a group of Black Lives Matter activists released a big thing last summer 2016, which accused Israel of genocide. I heard from other people in Black Lives Matter who reached out to me to apologize. They were embarrassed by what had happened. I mean, they're not a monolith. They don't all agree with this. But there is work to be done to try to, and after this incident that I described this summer in Chicago, we worked with the Human Rights Campaign and the other big LGBTQ advocacy groups. So we are, at the ADL, I might not agree with all these groups on everything, but I'm going to run right at them and try to get them, explain to them where we're coming from and why this view is so wrong. Why this view is so wrong. And that's how we approach it. There's some folks I won't talk to. There are lines I draw. Absolutely. If you say that Israel's a genocidal state, I really don't have anything to say to you. If you're that warped and that unwilling to root your conversation in facts and morals, I won't talk to you. But there are a lot of other folks we have to talk to kind of bring them around to our side of the tribe. And we build coalitions and we find areas where we have shared interests to try to build from there. All right, that was, yeah, Marty?
Let me preface my question by giving you a little bit of background. My late brother, was a professor of Russian history at Cal Berkeley during the free speech movements, and he was one of the faculty who actually risked his professorship by supporting the free speech movement. I'm a graduate of Brandeis University, and we had issues on Brandeis in terms of free speech. And I'm just wondering, how do we deal with the First Amendment and free speech on campus at the same time permitting all these anti-Semitic groups and racist groups to come on and have the floor, and they're able to say whatever they want to say? I'm a firm supporter of free speech, yet I find it hard to reconcile the permissiveness of letting it go on.
Make sure everybody heard Marty asks about free speech issues on campus, basically, and how do we deal with this? Marty, again, if you're at Cal, your family of people from Cal, let alone Brandeis, these are issues on both sides of the coast. All over the country, I think that there are issues in terms of the abuse of freedom of speech and the closure of freedom of speech on our campuses. Freedom of speech, when the Founding Fathers wrote that, freedom of speech, they didn't write freedom to slander. When they wrote talk about freedom of expression, they didn't envision the freedom to incite violence. And by the way, you notice the Supreme Court jurors who kind of laid this out very effectively Is Brandeis, who did it some hundreds some odd years ago. So, look, there are problems wherein, and I think sometimes college administrators hide behind this, and they forget. We were just talking with, I was talking with Ari Berman and Yeshidi. Who was I talking with about this? Was it Rabbi Berman? Yeah, they think it was Rabbi Berman. They forget that they are institutes of learning, and they need to take a values-based approach to that learning, right? Not a values-less approach, anything goes. So I worry a lot about this. I think the freedom of speech closure is one that happens more on the left in these campuses, where anything goes, if you will. And we just saw this, man. I was dealing at Cal last week or 2 weeks ago with this hideous anti-Semitic cartoon in the paper, like this gross caricature of Alan Dershowitz. It's crazy to think that it was in the paper. Anything goes, unless you're Ben Shapiro, who's a conservative thinker, can't even get on campus. So it's a problem. It's something that, you know, we're fierce advocates for the free speech, but it's got to be applied appropriately. Both sides allowed. And again, draw lines when it's not really speech, when it's slander. When it's not really talking, it's terrorizing people. That's not what the Founding Fathers had in mind when they wrote first.
I think I saw Cheryl all the way in the back, and Sam, and those are going to be our last two questions.
Well, how about this? I'll do something radical. How about you all get to ask your questions, ask them quick, and I'll try to answer them all.
Okay, okay.
I thank you for a lot of work that the ADL's done, and I attended the PBS conference at the UN
Well, that's nice.
last spring for lawyers, and my daughter attended one for students. And I'm very concerned with 3 college students right now, college freshmen, and there are a lot of issues on campuses, as you say, and just to let you know, even when there's a good percentage of Jews, my daughter's at Tulane, and it's a high percentage of Jews. Now the conversation on campus is we have too many Jews. There's too many Jews on this campus, we need to change that. So just to let you know, if that's not in ADL's purview, that's an issue. But bigger question, when you
Ask me quick, because I want to involve.
when you were talking about Trudeau and Trump and the Holocaust, and making statements that don't involve Jews, and now we're talking about how a lot of anti-Semitism is really sort of hidden as anti-Zionism. It seems like that's all a pattern, because as we all know, without the Holocaust, the likelihood of us having gotten Israel, especially at that time, is very minimal at best, right? So do you see all of this as, I don't know, a movement toward trying to destroy the state of Israel?
I guess the short answer, Cheryl, is, what's that?
You want to stick to your radical plan to take all the questions?
Oh, yeah, let's take all the questions. Let's take all the questions.
Really glad. So Sam, you're next. Hang on, Sharon.
I want just to extend the conversation on free speech with the advent of the...
Who's that? I'm sorry, what's your name, sir?
Sam.
Sam.
The internet, which is a relatively new piece of technology,
Yeah.
is a major driving force for the improvement of anti-Semitic attitudes.
Social media.
Yep.
Social media, but just the internet in general.
Yeah.
And what approach institutionally and individually we have.
Okay, I'll answer that question about the internet.
Great.
Other question?
Yeah, I just have.
What's your name, ma'am?
Shira.
Shira.
I was in the UN, just like Cheryl, but
Great.
something that I would address.
Could you stand up? You can't
Jewish
hear.
people, Jewish group people, especially when corporate forms are very, very important. The Jewish people at JCC especially, and Student Justice for Palestine. What are you doing? JCC just, repeat everything to Student Justice for Palestine, say, we were, many times.
JCC or JCC?
JCC, we were outside, we were appalled how they came out, they believe everything, Student Justice for Palestine does. That they get pieces, they put them together, social media, we're talking about.
Sharon, hang on. We want to get to everything. So that's the question. JCC, this gentleman, this is one of
And you
justice.
see the praises of the law.
What was your name, sir?
Arnie.
Are you?
You see the praises of the law enforcement However, wherever the Nazis marched throughout the country, it is always the counter-demonstrators that get arrested. It is very rare that the Nazis get arrested. Only if they kill somebody like they did in Virginia, or they shoot like they did in Austin, Texas, are they ever arrested. It's almost always the counter-demonstrators. But my question to you is, you admit that Trump is, what he says has an effect in the constant rising trend of anti-Jewish incidents that are happening. Why aren't you willing to actually push the button a little bit and calm him on it?
Okay. Blue?
Harriet, easy question. What are the main differences between the educational programs between the AJC and the ADL? You do terrific work.
Thank you. Okay. Take them all. Oh, one more question. Oh, you got your question.
Yeah, you got it.
Other people. Other people.
They have
Okay.
3 days training them to repeat the same lies.
Okay. I got it.
Can you stop this?
Okay. There was a person in the back, last person. In the blue.
I'm so grateful for so many of the things you're doing, but I have to also, you said we should always question if something sounds like it needs to be questioned. So I'm asking you, when you are, because I didn't really believe some things that I heard about ADL training the police and things. So, but I'm concerned when you are training anyone who is armed, how you deal with the Torah principle of not sharpening the sword of the enemy. Because sometimes there are friends and sometimes they're not our friends. And we want to deal with that.
Ruth, I'll be honest, I don't really understand the question. What's the question?
If you're doing nonviolent distinguishing training for police, if you're doing community sensitivity with the people that you're trying to teach to understand about issues of anti-Semitism, because sometimes we've got on the power people who say nice things to us, but we can't always trust the power people who say nice things to us.
Okay. So, very last question. You gotta ask
I
me.
noticed in the
What's your name, ma'am?
Abigail West.
Abigail, okay. Quick.
I noticed in the Jewish Week,
Yeah.
there's an advertisement that COA is having a meeting and outside of England speaking. Why are they having Steve Bannon speak?
Okay. So, last one. Go back.
You're a better man than I.
Nate?
I wanted to contribute to your own stance that anti-Zionism is really anti-Semitism. I'm a member of NORPAC.
It's a great organization, I know.
And we learn every year something called the 3D test.
Yeah, I know. Demonization.
You know about that, but it's very powerful.
Agreed.
Yeah, just to mention.
Okay, so, quickly, to answer the Abigail's question,
Lightning round.
I cannot tell you why the COA invites Steve Bannon, you gotta ask them.
What was it?
The question was asked by Abigail, why does the COA invite Steve Bannon to their conference? You gotta ask them. I can't speak for the COA. I also, Harriet, don't know about the Harriet. I don't know about the education programs of the AJC. So I'm really unable to speak to them. But you can go to adl.org/education, it's all about our stuff. And I think we have some brochures here.
We do.
There's some brochures outside you can check out if you want to see. So Ruth, I didn't totally, to be frank, didn't totally understand your question, but I will tell you this. So we work with law enforcement on a range of different issues, training them in what is hate, what are hate crimes, how are they different than ordinary offenses, how to deal with the victims of hate crimes. We deal with them. We have a lot of trainings for law enforcement. And I think at the end of the day, we certainly improve. We are far from perfect. I wouldn't say that we've got it all figured out. But what I would say is that the training we've done with law enforcement has helped build the relationships that allow me to say to you with great conviction that, yeah, the 1,300 or so incidents of anti-Semitism I mentioned earlier in my talk are being investigated and taken seriously by the police. I can't say that that was always true. And I can also tell you that the largest victim of hate crimes in the United States are not Jews. We are the most affected minority of religious-based hate crimes. Sheer volume. We get affected more than Muslims, more than Sikhs, more than anyone else. But I can tell you that the biggest victim of hate crimes in the United States are African Americans. And the reason why those incidences get investigated the way they do is in large part because we've trained the police and got them focused on those issues. So again, could we do better? Absolutely. Could we improve our programs? Absolutely. But I take, I think it is an area that we do some pretty positive work, and I hope it will continue and expand in the years ahead. Now, to Arya's question, I think many would say that we have pushed the button with President Trump quite a bit. I mean, we were first in line to criticize him on things like the Muslim ban, on things like his statements about Mexicans, on like his Holocaust Remembrance statement. And members of the Jewish community criticized me personally when I came out vis-a-vis his comment about Holocaust, the non-state Holocaust Remembrance Day. And I was criticized at other points for things I said about President Trump and some of his advisors, like Steve Bannon. But you know what? Again, there's nothing. If he were a Democrat, I'd be saying the same things. So I have to be careful to try to not be political. I have to be careful to try to call it evenly on both sides, to the extent it is even. But I definitely feel like the positions we've taken have been principled and been purposeful and been the right ones on the issues. To Shira's question about the JCC, look, the JCC where I grew up, hold on, Shira. The JC where I grew up, Bridgeport, Connecticut, had nothing to do with anything political. It was a place where I went to preschool, where I went to summer camp, where I went to after-school programs. That's what it was. For the most part, frankly, for all part, I have never seen a JCC get political. I don't know JCC executive directors who are taking political positions. And they may invite a speaker you don't like here and there, but I have never seen a trend in JCCs. On the other hand, the other group you asked about, Students for Justice in Palestine, is deeply, profoundly problematic. And they are hostile to the core. And they are a real, real issue. Which ties me back to the question that kind of Cheryl asked about. And it gets back to a bit about what Danielle asked about earlier. I don't think all of these groups want to, quote unquote, destroy the state of Israel. But I do think SJP, in particular, absolutely does not believe in the legitimacy of a Jewish state and does not believe in a Jewish right to self-determination. Why do I think that? Because that's what they say. And so I take them at their word. I think we should take people at their word. I think we should listen to what people say, and we should remember what they say. And so I don't think that everyone who expresses an anti-Semitic attitude wants to destroy the state of Israel, but there are definitely those who tried to co-opt the intersectionality agenda with an anti-Zionist agenda for an anti-Zionist intent. Yeah, I know. So Sam, to your question, the internet. So look, the interesting, it didn't come up the whole time. The front line in fighting hate is not the campus. It's Facebook, and it's Twitter, and it's social media platforms where this slander proliferates. So, this is the reason why next week we're opening an office in Silicon Valley. This is why we work, my background is in tech. So we're working with Google and Facebook and Twitter and Reddit and Microsoft every single day, helping them identify extremist content and getting it taken off their platforms. We've got a great project we're doing with Google on using artificial intelligence and machine learning to neutralize online hate before it happens. So the ADL is 110% committed to technology and using innovation to attack this problem. Innovation in tech can be, basically the extremists have exploited them very effectively. It's time that we grab them back, and that's what we're intending to do. I'm sorry I don't have time.
No, that was incredible. That was the last round was a tour de force. Outside, and thank you for playing refreshments outside. I know Jonathan will stick around for a few more minutes, but whenever Ariel says it's time to go, please let him go. And thank you so much to everybody for being here.